Hello, good afternoon or good morning to everyone. Just wait a few minutes for people to connect. Okay, we'll wait 1 more minute and after we will start because it's quite a long session. Then good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to this new session. Then it will be a series of webinars because we have two webinars planned, one today and the next day and time next week for the second webinar. Then this webinar is around then the changes in the EU legislation on organic. This webinar is on understanding the new organic regulation, key changes for agri-food suppliers. The second one will be more on practical thing, on how to adapt to those changes and practical insight for the agri-food supplier chain. My name is Marie-Hélène Kestemont. I work for the COLIT. I work for the Regulation and Standard Department and also sometimes for the technical assistance. Then we invite you to this webinar through our program FFM Plus, which I will present a little bit more in detail later on. It's a webinar mode. Then we ask you please to put your any comment on the chat. But if you have technical question, please use the Q&A box you will see next to the chat. And if you don't see it, you need to push on the three dots and you will have there possible to ask question. It will be easier to manage the question like this. And just feel free to put all the question you have. If it's maybe more practical questions, we can also address those questions during the next webinars. Okay, then those webinars are only in English this time, then this week and next week, but we plan also a session end of March in French with the two same webinars, but in French. Then we will go now. Can you please go to the next slide? Then the planning for today is I will give you a very short presentation of who is COLIT and what we do. After we will have Fibel that will present you everything around the organic regulation. I already thank them very much because they are making a very incredible work on that to explain and to make it easier to understand all those changes because really it's not so easy to understand. And we will finalize the session with a Q&A session. Next slide, please. Then about COLIT. Then I guess most of you know already COLIT, and it's the Committee of Liaison of Entrepreneurship, Agriculture and Development. We are a non-profit association of the private sector, and our members are mainly importers from Europe and exporters from ACP countries. Our vision, you can see on the left corner, it's growing people. Then it's everything about capacity building, in fact. I'm not going to take you a lot of time on those things because I know we need a lot of time to speak about organic. But if you need any more information, go to our website, it's colit.link, and you will find all the information about this. But in a few words, then, our mission is we want to facilitate and implement action allowing direct and indirect action that contribute to address SDGs. Our main areas of activities, they are facilitating market access, strengthening value chain, and leveraging impact. Then you will see a lot of more information on our website and some videos that can explain you what we do. And now I will give you only a few words about our main project program. We have the FFM Plus program, which is Fit for Market Plus program. It's a program focusing mainly on horticulture, and mainly fruit and vegetables. It's mainly capacity building, training assistance that we can give to member countries of OECPS, then the organization of ACP countries. It's financed by the EU and also by the OECPS. It has started in 2001. It's a 5-year program. It's also a demand-driven program. Then people need to send us an application for support, and we analyze that request, and we can give support based on their needs. Please, next one. And the other, then this webinar is done under mainly FFM Plus, but all the information will gather through AgriInfo program. Then AgriInfo program is another kind of program which it's not technical assistance, but it's information program. Then what we do is we are doing the monitoring of the changes in the EU regulation regarding everything around agri-food business. Then in this case, we don't work only for fruit and vegetables. There's also meat, for example, rice, cereals, chocolate, coffee, and a lot of value chain. Then I can invite you to have a look also at the website. It's agriinfo.eu. There you will have a very short video explaining the program. And you can also register to the newsletter, and you will be updated on all the changes in the EU legislation that impact non-EU countries. At the moment, we have a database with a lot of information, with more than 500 documents. You can look also in the database. It's funded by the EU. Next slide, please. And when we speak about CoLead also, we speak about a toolbox. Then we have a lot of information available on our website. You have free access, everything is free of access. Then you have a lot of data. You have e-learning. You have thousands of documents going from how to produce mango, for example, what is the market trend. You have a lot of information. Then don't hesitate to have a look on our website. Okay, next slide, please. I think now it's okay. Now it's the turn of Florentine from FIBL. Then thank you very much to be there and to support all of us to understand that difficult topic altogether. Thank you, Florentine. I leave you the floor.
Thank you, Marie-Hélène. And warm welcome also from my side. My name is Florentine Mainshausen. I work for FIBL. And I also want to introduce you to Brian Sebunya, my colleague from Uganda, who will be sort of helping to keep me on track, tell me if I'm too fast or too slow, and he will administer the questions and in the end moderate the Q&A section that we'll do together. Brian and I have been holding trainings on a new regulation together for CoLead now in Africa for already 3 years almost. So it's very nice to be in this session together, Brian. So today is all about the new organic regulation, which actually, as you can see by its name, 2018-848 is not that new anymore, but it's new for all of us in third countries. And today we're going to talk more about what it is and what does it mean and what are the implications for organic suppliers in Africa and other countries. So today we'll talk first about the completely new compliance system for imported products. then go through the most important changes with regard to the organic production rules, what you need to do to meet the regulation, and then start looking at the new requirements for producer groups and trader working with smallholders. This topic is very big and very complex, as we'll see, and we'll dive much deeper on this next week when we have more time to go into the specifics of adaptation to these new rules. We'll also look at the new certification process, including the recognition of control bodies and the role of national ministries or national authorities in the countries of production, because this is also causing a lot of confusion with the new import rules. And please note, this is not, although EU funded, it's not an official view or interpretation of the regulation, and is provided for training purposes. And to the best of our knowledge, I've been trying to explain this regulation for the last 3 years, and I keep learning and being challenged by it, but I'll try my best for you today. So let's start with the change, the biggest change, the change to compliance. So the organic regulation, the 2018-848, is the basic act, the most important regulation, laying down the new rules on organic production and labeling. It revised and strengthened the control system, in particular for imported products, so the trade regime, and replaced the previous regulation on organic farming. The stated aims are to encourage sustainable development of organic production in the EU, guaranteeing fair competition for EU farmers and operators. So this clearly is a clear intention, which is what we'll feel in the rules for third countries outside the EU. Also preventing fraud and unfair practices and improving consumer confidence in organic products. This new regulation has really significant direct implications for organic producers in all third countries outside the EU. Many aspects are clarified and sort of written more clearly, but also there have been a lot of the rules are adjusted to make sure that there is more adherence or more alignment between organic practices within the EU and in third countries, because this has grown more disconnected over the last, or it was seen to have different standards, and the aim of this regulation is to bring it all closer together so that it's the same set of rules for everyone, whether in the EU or outside. So the big change for imports of organic product is from the previous systems of equivalence. So far organic products are certified according to the organic control body's equivalent organic standards. So the idea was that the organic goods are produced in ways that are different but equivalent in terms of outcomes and alignment with organic principles. The new approach now is compliance, and it means compliance with every word of the regulation. Same rules for a farmer in Germany as for a farmer in Uganda. And this has real implications on how we also need to read and view the new rules. So organic products must be produced exactly according to the same set of rules as those in the EU, with no possibility to recognize equivalence. There are a few aspects where the rules are specifically adapted for third countries, but that's very explicitly then also part of the same regulation. And again, why did it change? To clarify, to remove inconsistencies, and most of all, to align what is seen as the quality of organic control and production between the EU and non-EU producers. So this was a clear intention, and we feel this with the changes at every turn. The organic regulatory framework is actually, as Colleen tells me, one of the most complex regulations they have to cover in their updates. There is more than 50 secondary acts to this regulation, and they keep being issued and updated and amended. So the 2018-848 is the basic act, the biggest, most important document, but based on it, there are delegated and implementing regulations which do apply in addition to the Basic Act. So some of really important rules are defined in secondary acts. So it's important to look up at times also information in secondary regulations. And there is also a very important supplementing document, the frequently asked question on organic rules, which particularly for smallholder groups clarify a couple of key issues that are otherwise quite unclear and not directly necessarily visible in the legal text. And again, the reference to AgroInfo, which to my view is the best and most of all also most up-to-date database with all the organic regulations, always including a short summary specifically for producers in non-EU countries. And just to show you when you need to find a regulation, and unfortunately, if you are in charge of compliance within your operation, you will need to familiarize with the legal texts as well. We can provide some overview, but for specific questions, you may need to work eventually with the regulatory text. You can find the regulations by searching for the number. And what is important is that these regulations, they are regularly amended and updated. So always look out for this sign for current consolidated version. And this applies to the 848, but also to some of the secondary acts, like the list of recognized control bodies. You need to click on go to consolidated version to see the last version. Otherwise you'll be utterly confused because you get the old or original act. So under the new system, under the new compliance system, there is still 2 options for organic imports into the EU. There is 14 countries that are recognized by the EU at the moment as their national organic systems are recognized as equivalent, so to say. So far, this is, for example, Switzerland, the UK, the US, but also India or Argentina, for example, and there is already trade agreements with Chile, UK, and Switzerland. So this country recognition is also being phased out and replaced by trade agreements, but the end of this transition for imports from these specific 14 countries is the end of 2026. Now, these are only 14 countries. For the rest of the world, so that means all of Africa except for Tunisia, for example, we are the other third countries, and this is what is the focus of our webinar and all the trainings we do, because these are the countries now where the EU regulation, the 848, now will apply directly. These countries are so far certified under third country control body recognition as equivalent, and this is now being replaced by the system of compliance with the EU legislation directly, and there was a 3-year transition period since 2022 when the regulation started to apply in Europe to the end of last year, the end of 2024. And all CBs had to apply for recognition again to be recognized under the new compliance system. And this transition period has now ended. So we are now fully in the compliance mode, which in the past I've only talked about as being in the future. So just to summarize again, the regulation is already in force, so it's not exactly new, but because of the 3-year transition period, it has not been directly felt in third countries yet. And as we'll see, almost nobody has yet been controlled according to the new regulation, but this transition period is now over. By now, since mid-2024, control bodies have been recognized by the EU in sort of monthly batches, in 4 batches. By now, we have 49 recognized control bodies. And the time that organic control was still according to the old regulation during the transition period has ended now. And towards the end of 2024, compliance control have started. And now from the 1st of January this year, only the new regulation applies. But there is a derogation period until the 15th of October that imports of products that are certified under the old regulation can, under certain conditions, still be valid for import consignment. So TCs or COIs can still be issued based on an equivalent certificate, but only under certain conditions, which we're going to look at a bit more because the rules are ferociously complex and complicated also to apply in practice. The point is that although the intention was to have a 3-year conversion period or transition period, the transition is now very abrupt because the recognition of control bodies was delayed and only started in mid-2024. And basically all control bodies, as far as I'm aware of, just switched to the new compliance control very late in 2024. At the latest in October, November 2024, all CBs switched to fully doing only control under the new regulation. It means that most certificates for 2024 are still based on the equivalence with the old regulation. So it was still the old rules and not yet the new rules that were controlled, which I'm going to present today. So since 1st of January, only the new regulation applies. There can be no more control, no more certificates can be issued under the old regulation, not even operator certificate. And most, specifically producer groups, but also single operators, will be checked for compliance with all the new rules for the first time now in 2025. The majority of organic producer groups and operator has never received an inspection according to the new regulation yet, but at the same time, until the 15th of October 2025, and this was already a compromise, a derogation, so an exception granted by the EU, all these organic operators and producer groups need to be certified according to the new regulation for imports to continue. So what is the situation right now? We have most operators and groups still certified under the old regulation, but the new regulation applies. So right now, until mid-October, products that are certified under the old regulation can still be imported. That means for shipments, the control body can issue certificates of inspection so that the products can be imported as organic into the EU. But only if this control body is now recognized for compliance by the EU, if the certificate has been issued before the 31st of December 2024 and is still valid, so obviously not longer than the validity of the certificate, and while the compliance certification is pending. This means that the supplier must have committed to compliance, for example, by signing contracts according to the new regulation or confirming that they apply for compliance certification. But also please note that it doesn't mean you can automatically export until the 15th of October. If your control body comes next month and does an audit and finds critical non-compliances, they have to apply their catalog of sanction. So it's not that you can simply expect that you can export with your old certificate no matter what until the 15th of October. But the 15th of October is the final end date. From that time onwards, only suppliers certified in compliance with the new regulation can continue exports. If not, if the certificate is not ready by then, it would mean that organic imports are no longer possible. So what are the key challenges? Sorry, I see a mistake there on my slide. The key challenge is a stricter word-by-word compliance with the new rules. This is a very important change that is actually very hard to understand in practice. There's also entirely new rules for producer groups with a new definition of group of operators, which has very far-reaching implications for all smallholder supply chains. There's new control requirements and procedures. And one key challenge is that the rules are so complex that so far, both groups, operators, as well as experts anywhere in the world do not really yet understand all the rules. And also the traders and importers in Europe are not yet fully aware or even aware at all that there are certain challenges now for the EU producers, because many operators in the EU think, you know, the new regulation has already been in place for 3 years, and you know it was quite the big implications that are ahead or that suppliers are facing. So far, there isn't enough clarity or knowledge of those challenges, and this makes it hard for everybody concerned. So what are the new production rules? In a way, that's simple, because although there are some changes, some rules have changed or become more strict, but the biggest change for producers in third countries is that all EU rules apply word by word. And this doesn't mean if it says a document, you have to document A, B, C, D. It doesn't mean you have to document something. It means you have to document A, B, C, D. And this sort of rigor of the regulatory text is something that for application in third countries, we all need to get used to. It is a change of mindset to read the rules much more with a nitty-gritty, word-by-word mindset. In addition to that, there are some significant changes which we're going to look at. There is more restrictions with regard to authorized substances, especially for plant protection. There is stricter rules on retroactive recognition of conversion, parallel production, and non-organic units on the farm, as well as seed and planting materials, crop rotation, and separation of units. So let's start with some simple ones. As before, the whole farm holding should be managed organically, but it is permitted to split the farm in different production units. So there is now both an organic production unit and new also an in-conversion unit, which must be separate from the organic unit. And all crops in the respective units must be managed according to the rules. This means that also land for crop rotation, for example, of the organic crops needs to be included in the organic unit. The non-organic unit, in the non-organic unit, only different crops or different easily distinguishable varieties shall be planted. And of course, there is the need for strict separation of organic and conversion unit. So some of this is not completely new, but it is true that in many countries so far, control bodies or also ICS have not registered necessarily all land operated by the farmer. For example, not only the coffee plots, but also the home consumption maize fields of the farmers, even if it's in a different location. But according to the definition of the production units, it's all agricultural land operated by the farmer that need to be registered in order to ensure the separation and manage the contamination risk. With regard to parallel production, I said normally you cannot produce the same indistinguishable variety in the organic unit and the non-organic unit, but there is still exceptional circumstances where this is allowed, but the rules have become considerably stricter and the time frame is shorter. So effectively, you have to change the start conversion on the last plot of the farm after 2 years, which is quite a short time frame to manage the transition. And of course, there is many detailed conditions when this is applying. Again, this is something you would need to look up in detail in the regulation because it's actually a long list of conditions that apply. So with regard to conversion period, the rules, the duration of the conversion period has not changed. For example, it's still 3 years for perennial crops, but it's even more explicit than before that the conversion of the land starts with the notification of activities. That's basically the application for certification to the control body. And once all rules are met. And the CB sets the official begin of conversion, but it starts with officially the moment that you go under the control system. So if you want to recognize, as it was frequently done before, that you say for the first audit, well, but my land, all the land I'm farming has been farmed organically for the last 3 years. This is called retroactive recognition of the conversion period. And this is still possible, but the rules for it have become considerably stricter, and it's also extremely more time, or it's much more expensive, because you need to request for each plot of land the retroactive approval, submit detailed documentation, but also the CB has to carry out a risk analysis, take samples, do an inspection report, and issue a final report. And the CB must even notify its accreditation body for each retroactive recognition granted. So I think this drives the message home. This will be an exception, and it's also quite costly. It's not going to be the standard procedure. And as far as I'm aware, for many regions in Africa in particular, this is something that definitely will be felt, depending a bit how your CB handled this aspect in the past. Also, crop production has to take place on living soil. So for example, hydroponics is not allowed, and there is a few exceptions. Anything else is not permitted. There is new, slightly stricter rules on the use of organic plant reproductive materials and seeds, but there is still the SCP can still grant authorization for the use of non-organic seeds and planting materials. But it must be authorized before sowing or planting, is only for one season at a time. And please note that nothing can be treated. For example, you cannot use any treated seeds. And this would put your plot back to non-organic if you do. And non-organic grown seedlings are also not permitted. For maintaining and increasing soil fertility, the rules now, the regulation is now more specific, that the fertility and biological activity of the soil shall be maintained and increased by application of livestock and organic matter, and by multi-annual crop rotation, including mandatory leguminous crops in case of annual crops. So this is something which in many production systems in third countries is actually a key challenge. I've just heard of a problem, say, in quinoa in Bolivia, where you just have no rotation crops at all. And so this already is a rule, because it's now very explicit, which can be challenging. At the same time, of course, crop rotation is indeed extremely relevant and important. And for perennial crops and greenhouse crops, it can be increased by plant diversity and use of short-term green manures and legumes. But again, this is something that is a much more explicit rule that needs to be met. Fertilizers and soil amendments can only be used if the other measures are not sufficient, and only if the products and substances are listed in the 1165. This is a secondary act that contains all the authorized substances and products. This is a bit similar to the list we already had in the past under the other regulation, where you had a list of authorized substances. For organic pest and disease management, again, there is a wide range of preventive measures to be taken before you can use any substances for plant protection. And also it's very explicit with type of records you need to keep. But important is that there are new restrictions, especially for plant protection substances. That's because of how the rules are written in the 1165, and they refer to other EU regulations. And some currently authorized, particularly plant extracts, but also some microorganism-based substances may not be authorized under the new regulation, although they have been authorized so far. So this aspect is at the moment actually changing. I've seen a draft version of this revision which would solve some of the key issues, but especially for plant extracts in plant protection products, there are new restrictions. So please be careful and check carefully with your CB whether the products you're using so far will still be okay under the new system. This is important to check with your CB, the rules are really complicated, and it's easiest if you ask your CP for your specific products. The general rules for product handling, well, yeah, I've just listed the respective references. There's also a great focus on documentary account and records to carry out traceability checks and to document your precautionary measures. So the need for documentation has certainly increased and not decreased with the new regulation, and there is a great focus on traceability. And for processed food, I'm not reading out the rules and just referring to where to find the information. You will all receive the slide back afterwards, so if you need to look up some details, you can do so. And there is also some relevant, again, a wide range of secondary acts that list different aspects on import rules, which are sort of important for importers, exporters as well. But this is no longer completely new, because the import scheme in the EU has already been according to the new legislation for the past year. So, for example, by now, all exporters will be used to the idea that the COI needs to be issued before the product leaves the harbor, basically. So this was new maybe a while ago and still a shock sometimes last year, but by now it's no longer completely new because these rules have already been applied at the EU import side. So everybody got a bit more used to that side. So I missed the earlier section, Brian. Do we have any questions yet?
No, definitely. And there was a request to slow down, but I think people can get the details in the slides at that point. We have a few questions, but I think some we can answer at the end. But the fact that you spoke about certification bodies, there is a question from Charles Minter, who is wondering what the implications of these changes are for certification bodies operating in Africa. Are there specific issues that will require adjustments in the way organic certification bodies operate?
Yeah, a lot of adjustment if that control body has applied for recognition under the EU regulation. But I would, if it's okay, maybe defer the question and maybe take it up again, because we have a section a bit later on now where we talk about the recognition of control bodies and the procedures that they need to meet. So that might fit well in that context.
Great. Then we can proceed. The rest can be answered as well at the end.
Okay. And again, with the production rules, I mean, in such a webinar, I've taken up mostly what's changed and what we have seen as creating more problems. There is also, as we'll see, a handbook by FIBL, which goes through the production rules in more details with all the illustrations and also some of the other rules in more detail. And you might also need to look up some things, but yeah, I've just tried to give an overview, and there is a bit more information on that available as well. So let's now talk briefly about new requirements for producer groups and contract production organized by processors and exporters due to the new definition of a group of operators. This, for me, has been my big topic over the last 3 years of work, because the EU regulation defines a completely new concept of a group of operators. As now a group of operators defined directly in the regulation, and the intention was also to allow group certification not only in third countries, say in Africa or Latin America, but also within the EU. So it's the same set of rules, and it's directly defined within the basic act of the regulation. In Article 36(1) defines what a group of operators is. And this definition is what has caused most both discussion, but also what is extremely hard to understand properly and apply in practice, because as we'll see, about 70% of all currently certified groups do not meet this definition to the letter. And this is where the adaptation comes in that Marie-Hélène already mentioned that makes everything quite complex. So what is a group of operators according to Article 36(1) of the regulation? A group of operators is composed only of members who are farmers that are basically committed to organic production. So they must be organic or conversion farmers, can't be non-organic farmers. And these farmers, the members, also need to be under a maximum size or turnover limit, which in simplified terms is to be smaller than 5 hectares of land or have less than 25,000 euro organic turnover. The group of operators cannot have more than 2,000 members. It must have legal personality of its own, operate an internal control system, has a system of joint marketing, and members shall be in geographic proximity, and each member shall only be registered in one group of operators for a given product. Now, if you look at this definition, at first glance, it doesn't sound impossible. It seems meaningful and nice, but there are big challenges with this definition and big implications for many hundreds of producer groups worldwide. So let's talk first about what everybody discusses first. What about the 5 hectare rule? Everybody's like, oh, what about the 5 hectare rule? We have many farms that are bigger than 5 hectares. The rules is actually complicated to read, but it can be simplified very nicely. You can be member if you have less than or up to 5 hectares of land, or if your organic turnover is smaller than 25,000 euro per year. So to check the farm, to check eligibility of your members in a producer group, you first can check, is the total landholding, not only the coffee plot, total landholding of the farmer smaller than 5 hectares. If it is, okay, this farm is already eligible for being member in a group of operators. But if the farm is bigger than 5 hectares, then you need to look at the organic turnover. And this is the members' organic sales to the group, because only that counts as organic production. And if this is below 25,000 euro, then this farm can be member and certified in a group of operator. If not, it cannot be member and needs to be certified as an individual farm, or it splits to be under 5 hectares. Important for implementation, and this is very confusing, is most farms in groups are smaller than 5 hectares, and then you don't need to look at the turnover. But also farms with more than 5 hectares can be members if their organic turnover, their sales to the group is smaller than 25,000 euro a year. And Brian, I don't know about the very last course, but in all the courses we have done and all the exercises we have done with producer groups all over Africa, even farms with, I don't know, up to 20 hectares of total land still had organic turnovers way lower than 25,000 euros. So don't panic about the 5 hectares as a key message. And especially in Africa, unfortunately, the chances that your farmers are higher than the 25,000 euro annual organic turnover are quite slim. So please don't be hung up about the 5 hectares, and don't exclude all members that are bigger than 5 hectares. Check their organic turnover first, and the simplest estimate is to use the yield estimate times the farm gate price as a first rough estimate of their potential organic sales even. And that doesn't even mean they sell you all their production or you buy all their production. No? So what are the implications for organic farmers organizations like cooperatives or unions? So a farmers organization, a farmer cooperative, a producer association, a farmer cooperative union or federation of farmers. Producer association is composed of farmers, and it can be certified as a group of operators because it also has a legal entity, but only if the organization is legally composed only of farmers committed to complying with the organic rules. So basically it can be legally composed only of organic or in conversion members, who must be all farmers under the new farm size turnover limit. So as we said, in Africa, unlikely that any farms are too big, even if they're bigger than 5 hectares, but the big challenge is that many organizations have also non-organic statutory members. And this is then the part that creates most difficulties. And of course, it must be recognized under national law as having rights and duties. So the problem is that any certified farmers organization that has any non-organic members, or for example, has more than 2,000 farmers, cannot be certified as a group of operator in its current structure and composition, and needs to find adaptation solution. The farmer organization can be certified as operator, which is just like an operator for preparation and export. So you can be certified basically like as a company, but not as a group of operator, including all your smallholder farmers. So how can groups adapt? It's actually ferociously complicated. And even some groups who have been on the route for 1 or 2 years still are struggling with the last adaptation decisions. It's very important that they need to adapt, but in most cases, it's not advisable to split the association or to expel all non-organic members. This can also cause big problems and complicate or jeopardize other certifications, especially if the producer organization is also fair trade certified and, for example, has a large number of non-organic farmers. So if it can create havoc on the whole organization if the existing real organization is totally split or members are expelled. So each farmer organization should really carefully evaluate different options, and it's further complicated by the fact that most groups are certified according to different standards and regulation. But one option is clearly to set up a new group of operator unit, like a club or a new association, some kind of legal form of organic members of the group, like a new legal vehicle for all the organic farms that can be then certified as a group of operators, while the main mother organization is only certified as operator for export. If you set up a new entity, this is the yellow one in the picture, it means nicely that your fair trade certification doesn't need to change completely. In case of federations or unions of farmers organizations, so second degree, second grade producer organization, one of the available options that may be the most tangible and feasible one is to certify the primary farmers organizations as group of operators. Obviously, this has cost implication because instead of one certificate, you'll have 10 certificates or 12 certificates, but at least you have the existing legal entities, and there is this as an adaptation. In Latin America in particular, there is also the option of farm splitting or of farms coming together to basically form one farm company instead of being certified as farmers. But I think in Africa, this is maybe a bit less relevant than in Latin America. For process and export organized groups, which are very common, especially in Africa, they have their own challenge that a company with these farmers is not composed of farmers and cannot be certified as a group of operators. So all of this, as if you are so far an exporter with 1,000 smallholder growers under your certificate, not possible under the new regulation. And hopefully you've heard about this already in the last 3 years because now the new rules apply. So you need, all companies needed to adapt their supply chain and either move the certification to existing legal entities in their supply chain or set up new farmer groups that can be certified as group of operators while the processor trader becomes certified as just operator. What's also not permitted is a system of 100% control, as it is, for example, practiced in many Mediterranean countries or in Turkey, or that you have a group of farmers under one certificate without internal control system, but with 100% external control. That also does not meet the definition of a group of operator. We'll talk more about adaptation, but just in brief, according to our estimate, about 70% of all currently certified groups need to change their organizational legal setup to continue group certification for export to the EU. Adaptation is complex, needs to be considered and a solution found for each case. Yeah, and this is the big challenge we are still in. Hopefully many of you may have already overcome that hurdle, but according to a lot of cases I know, many are still in the process of finding an adaptation. The good news is that if there is a new entity, for example, for a new pharma group that delivers to either the cooperative or the trading company, there is many ways where by means of subcontracting or providing services, you can maintain similar operational procedures, but on papers, it's done as subcontracting or appointment of staff. And again, we'll look more into this during the next webinar. There's also a completely new set of very detailed new ICS requirements. So this is the course that Brian has been holding since 3 years at COLIT, organized how to adapt your ICS to the new rules. The ICS requirements are not entirely different to a high quality ICS in reality, but you still need to align all details of your ICS to the new rules and make sure that you're up to the quality levels that are expected under the new regulation, which is still challenging depending on how you're doing at the moment. There's new control and certification procedures. Brian, do we need any stop?
No, I think you can proceed. I've tried to answer some of them, but we can address any pending at the end.
Okay. So there are some changes that are the same for all operators and groups of operators, and it's sort of an additional focus on documented precautionary measures. So if you have an organic unit and non-organic unit, you need to go rinse your knapsack sprayer, for example. And you don't only need to do it, you also need to document it every time you do. And you need to have very detailed procedures how to do it that you'll be expected to show. So again, it's both about taking precautionary measures, but also taking them consistently and documenting them, which is a certain safety for you if there is a problem. There's a strong focus on product traceability and mass balance checks, and very heavy or even stricter than before measures in case of detectation of any unauthorized substances by either the operator or the control body. And products need to be blocked while investigating the cases of even suspected or confirmed presence. There needs to be an official investigation to determine the source and cause. And maybe some of you have already felt the implications of this stricter regime, which is applied already from the European side. So maybe some of you have already felt the first implications of this stricter regime. It's about to become more interesting because sampling will increase. So this year, it's definitely not gonna totally ease away this particular challenge, unfortunately. The EU has or will define also a list of high-risk high-risk products in third countries, which require a higher rate of control and more intense sampling. This list will be published as a secondary act and is not yet published. It will be still developed in 2025. So for this year, there is still the additional control measures for certain countries and products that are applied by means of an annual letter to control bodies. So for example, in 2025, in that list of products from certain countries that are high risk, this year is, for example, lentils, pomegranates, and sultanas from Turkey. There is no African country on the list. But for example, there is bananas from Peru, bananas from Ecuador, bananas from Domrep. So it's a list of products that is considered high risk, and for them, you need to have 2 annual control and a much higher sampling control, including a certain percentage, say 5, 10, or 20% of export consignments being sampled. So it's It has very, very heavy implications if your country and product is listed as high-risk country, high-risk product and country. There's also stronger or more intense inspection frequency and the new template for certificates. So there is a physical inspection of all operators and groups of operators at least once a year, plus unannounced inspections. And for high-risk products, as I mentioned, there's 2 physical inspections per year. There is a new operator certificate, so with a defined format and content. So it's no longer up to DCB to decide how they do the certificate. It's the model is in the certificate, is defined in a regulation, and they can only be, the certificates can only be issued via the new TRACES CB database. This is a big challenge too, because it's totally standardized what information you'll have on your certificate. Your certificate will be very long. It contains even the list of members that need or can be uploaded as part of the certificate. And because it's issued in TRACES, of course, it will now mean that from 2025, there will be one visible certification register. Now for the adaptation, this is also relevant because it's important to certify the right legal entity in this year already under the new system, because this is the entity that will be put into this new database. And there is certificates of inspection, which is still the same. There is stricter rules of sampling for analysis. For single operators like single farms or processes, the percentage is 5% that need to be subject to sampling. New is that also 2% of members in a group of operators are subject to sampling each year. And for high-risk products that I mentioned, there is a percentage set, how many % of shipments or consignments need to be sampled. So that's product specific and set in the respective letter at the moment and in the future regulation. For groups of operators, the control procedures have also been strengthened considerably, and especially for very large groups, this has very high cost implications. So for the annual external control of a group of operators, at least 5% of members need to be re-inspected by the external control body. This means a minimum of 10 members in case the group is small, and sampling for at least 2% of members. So for some of the very large groups in Africa, this means that the inspectors will spend many months of inspection to do the 5% of a very high number of very small farms. And in particularly also the 2% sampling occurs considerable higher costs. And also important to note is that there is an explicit articles that control body shall withdraw the certificate for the whole group where deficiencies in the setup or functioning of the ICS affect the integrity of the products, especially to the failures to detect or address non-compliances. This article has a long list of examples of ICS failures, which is quite concerning. If you've seen many ICS audits, it's quite worrying to see the list, because it just means it drives home the message that a really high quality of the ICS is expected, and if not, the whole groups need to be decertified. And for the restructuring of groups, I think this is a relevant factor, because essentially it's not ideal if your whole group is under one certificate. You might, if you're, for example, 2,000 farmers, you could decide to still have 2 groups of operators certified. So if you have ICS weaknesses, only one group is decertified and not the entire 2,000 farmers. So I've seen this as being very relevant strategy for risk mitigation during the process of adapting to the new rules. And as I said, the new databases allow now to cross-check the information much more quickly between the operator database and TRACES. So there's more control of imports, which is the whole intention. And hopefully it will also really help to minimize fraud and problems and so on. But everything is much more visible than it has been so far. So this is great. And also in terms of transparency of information over the years, of course, it will be great to have all certification data in one database. Initially, I assume it's a big challenge for control bodies to start working with a completely new set of database and a rigid system for issuing the certificates. We talked about the control bodies. So if you are a control body and you want to continue or start doing certification in compliance with the EU regulation for exports to Europe, you need to apply to the EU Commission. And the rules for this are described in the regulation 2021-1698. It defines the procedural requirements for the recognition of control bodies, but it also defines all the control procedures for third countries that all control bodies are expected to meet. Preparing this dossier, as far as I know, has taken every single control body many months. So that alone, in terms of impact or what's expected, is relevant. You need to submit an annual report to the EU. You need to adapt all your procedures, all your QS system to this new complex regulation. So it's definitely not an easy starting point for CBs to start offering EU organic certification. And you also need to update your accreditation according to the new regulation. Some control bodies, even European ones, quite a few have decided to not continue with third country certification. For example, CETICES used to certify in West Africa. They've decided it's too much of a hassle to continue doing it. They'll focus on EU certification only. And of course, this is further complicating the situation because in some countries there isn't so many control bodies that are active. The recognition of the control body is for each country, and they also had to submit proof for each country where they operate, that the authorities know of them operating in the country. So some are authorized for many countries, but then you also have a lot of documentation in your dossier to prepare, and some are recognized for only a couple of countries, but it's country specific. And the recognition process continues, so any control body can still submit a dossier, and then it takes a couple of months, and then if they meet all the conditions, and usually after several rounds of back and forth, they can become recognized. Maybe some of you wonder where to find the list. The regulations, they are published as updates to regulation 2021-1378. So they are added to Annex 2. And basically, this is a regulation where the consolidated version seems to be uploaded relatively swiftly. For example, in December, there was the last update of the list. And if you check now the consolidated version of the 1378, it already now includes all in total 49 CBs that have been approved in 4 different amending acts. So this is now becoming easier. Initially, it was actually very hard to even find the lists of recognized CBs. This is becoming a bit better now that the process is more established. But you need to know the number, otherwise you don't find it. You need to look for the 1378 and click on the consolidated version to find it. So, Brian, do you think that answers the question with regard to control bodies?
I think it does. The only piece that I didn't understand is whether he meant, you know, European certification bodies operating in Africa or African-based, you know,
there's no difference.
Exactly.
There's no difference. There's no difference. You can be based wherever. You need to meet the criteria, all the criteria. But of course, for European control bodies who are certifying according to this set of regulations in Europe already, it's a bit easier to navigate the regulatory framework, for example. But still, I think it's clearly a challenge for everyone in all trainings. I always had a lot of control. The situation is very challenging also for control bodies. I think it's not, I think some people think, oh, it's just a big business boost now because they can do more audits. I think that this change and the transition to the new system is seriously challenging for everyone, and the control bodies are asked a lot of questions. Now in the adaptation, many things need to be clarified, especially for groups of operators, and it's also ferociously complicated to understand and apply the new rules to this. You know, they were written for European farmers, and you have to apply them word by word in the Dominican Republic, in Uganda, and in the Ivory Coast. And it's really challenging, this situation. But in principle, the system is open for all that meet the standards, and also the rules are in a way more clearly defined. So you can work through same rules for everyone. So in that sense, it's definitely open also for, say, African-based control bodies. Okay. One question we had very strongly, say, in Sri Lanka, and I've actually noted it in many countries now, is it's a bit confusing what the role of national competent authorities is. Like, many countries have a national department of the agricultural ministry that is in charge of organic agriculture, or even a control office for organic agriculture, or have their own national regulation. So what does the new compliance system mean for national authorities? So one aspect that I think is very important is, if you read any regulatory text, it always talks about control bodies and control authorities. And the control authorities do not mean the ministry in Uganda, for example. Control authority is the EU term for a control body that is a state control body, because some countries like Spain, some EU member states have control authorities instead of control bodies. And the second term the regulation uses prominently is competent authority, like the organic competent authority in charge of organic certification. But this regulation is only about responsibility of EU member state competent authorities. This does not give any role to an authority or a competent authority in Uganda or Kenya, even if they would have a Kenyan organic regulation or an office of organic control. Because the entire, for third countries under the compliance system, the EU control system is mirrored in an adapted way for third countries, especially, you know, defined in the 1698. And all the primary responsibility is with the recognized third country control bodies. So the EU supervises that the control bodies do their job correctly. And it's the control bodies who have to decide on derogation, on exceptions, approving, for example, non-organic seeds. All of this is done by the control bodies, and they cover a lot of duties which in the EU are done by competent authorities. For example, in the EU, only the authority in Germany can grant retroactive recognition of conversion, but in Africa, it will be the control body who can do it. So the procedures are slightly mirrored, but there is no official role for a national competent authority in a third country in Africa now changing to compliance. And the control bodies are accredited and overseen by the Commission, DG Agri, so they have to submit annual reports, they're audited, they receive letter whether they meet the expectations or not. And there is no direct responsibilities for the national authorities. So what can be the role? As I said, the regulation itself doesn't define any role, but they can still, of course, play a very important role at fostering and strengthening the organic sector in their country. With regard to the change to compliance, activities we have seen is, for example, especially technical support and trainings of operators, a group of operators, aligning, getting together with your national control bodies to develop guidance or best practice on selected topics, or for example, which legal personalities are most suitable in our country for producer groups needing to adapt, or other aspects. They can coordinate between different ministries or departments to support adaptation measures. For example, in the Dominican Republic, a lot of firms are going to split to meet the 5-hectare rule, as they have high turnover as well. And there, of course, it's very important that this is well coordinated within the departments and regional entities of the agricultural ministry, for example, to facilitate that process. And of course, in general, the authorities promote organic farming, can promote their domestic market, and also offer training or foster alignment to different market requirements, because most countries export not only to the EU, but also to different countries. They can provide the national statistics and have more transparency. They can also do oversight measures like accompanied audits to make sure that all control bodies work consistently according to a similar level of quality, as an additional measure to have more harmonization and fair competition within the country, and decrease the risk that your country is put on additional measures, so to say. If you have an important organic sector, additional control measures can help you have a good market position by having a strong control system. I've listed here a couple of sources for more information, in particular the AgroInfo database that Marie-Hélène already referred to. We have also published a study on the impacts of the new regulation, specifically on smallholder products, where there is estimates of the number of groups affected in different products, number of producers affected, what are the big implications, what are cost implications, and so on. So this is now published. There is a training handbook on the new regulation. And also Naturland has updated their ICS manual according to the new rule, which is a valuable ICS manual resource that can be used. And there has been a vademecum on official investigation, which is very, if you're challenged with residue cases or contamination of products, I highly recommend that particular report. It's very technical, and it's according to the new regulation, focusing specifically on pathways of contamination and the official investigation, which is, by the way, something that also keeps European operators. Yeah, it's something that hits everybody, which is also causing a lot of challenges within Europe as well. If I saw in the registration that some are completely new to organic farming, for this case, to have a more generic introduction to organic farming practices, from soil fertility management to farm diversification, farm management, conversion to organic farming, and also recommendations for management of some crops like cotton or mango or rice in an organic way. I recommend the African Organic Agriculture Training Manual, which is available online, and it really is very full of illustrations, very simple to use, very practitioner friendly for farmer facilitation and training. So that's a completely different level than the very technical materials to meet a regulation of 250 pages. And here we are. I am on time, I think.
Yes, great job. Thanks, Florentine. So we've answered a couple of questions, but there are a few I would like to pose to you. So the first one from Betty Njeri, and of course after this, then maybe we can have time for some people to voice any, so we can hear from them as well. Has the annex of 1165, which stipulates the allowed cleaning and disinfecting substances, been published yet?
No. The annex is still empty, and I think this is one of the aspects where the Commission or the experts have realized that this is indeed more complex than they thought, because it needs to be an annex that is applicable for all types of products produced anywhere in the world. So I'm not entirely aware. I don't think it's even yet in a draft consultation mode. So this will take a moment to be published. So far there is not directly the list of authorized products for cleaning, but it's important indeed to keep out looking for it. And I'm sure once it's published, COLIT or the Agroinfo will issue a prominent reminder to everyone, and the CPs will as well, right?
The next one, do we have a clause in the regulation regarding metal detection?
Regarding what?
Metal detection.
Metal detection.
Exactly.
Well, that goes under the sampling, but it's not directly in this organic regulation. The screen, I mean, this is with the residue, maximum residue levels of products that apply. I mean, there's a lot of other EU regulations that are sometimes referenced in the organic regulation, but in any case apply in addition to the organic regulation. It will be the maximum, the general maximum residue levels, but maybe we could check again with the Agroinfo team whether which specific resource or link of information we could refer to for further information, because I'm sure this is a big topic for Agroinfo.
Great. There is, I know you spoke about this, but since it came, I wanted to raise it here. Is the situation where farmers have multiple certification schemes, for example, Rainforest Alliance or Organic NOP, what is the implication in terms of producer organization? Do they, do the same requirements still apply?
Well, I mean, for EU compliance, they need to meet every word of the EU regulation. The NOP has also now new rules for producer groups which they must meet, and none of these standards are harmonized with each other. So they will need to adapt their ICS that they meet every word of the EU regulation, and the NOP is actually a bit more flexible. So as long as they meet the EU regulation, they may need to consider some additional points, but it's definitely not become easier to be multi-certified. What I've seen in big groups in Africa, also because of cost reasons, there may be a case that, say, if you're a union with 18 primary societies and you sell half of your volume to the US and half to Europe, so far everybody has always been certified, both EU and NOP, because it makes life simple, and it was like the basic standard. But there was a system that it was quite flexible to mix, to meet both standards in combination, and also the costs were not crazy. Whereas with the new rules, and depending how much you need to change, I think more groups will go down a route where they say, okay, we'll only certify 8 primary societies for the EU and maybe 8 or even 10 for NOP, to keep costs at bay, because the 8 or 10 for NOP can probably still be certified as one groups, and we have the higher costs mainly for the EU volumes, and we only use it for the EU volume. So I've seen this quite a lot, that it's no longer always the best strategy to do all your production, both EU and NOP, as a sort of standard procedure. You might need to be more careful or think more about your target volumes for each market.
There is a question here, and probably also COLIT can speak to this. Do we have any successful stories of actors that have managed to switch from the old to the new system, and what it has taken them to do that?
I mean, I don't know. Can you share something from your trainings? I know one example, the company I work with, I mean, they don't have yet the new certificate as far as I know, but I think they have worked on it for 2 years and they have gotten there, but
No, it's a tough one. I've been supporting these cooperatives in Ethiopia. They don't have the certification yet, but I mean, it's more than 10,000 coffee farmers. So it's been really challenging, especially uh, where they have cooperatives, primary cooperatives that are more than, the 2,000 farmer limit in terms of how to, break them, into and divide them in a meaningful way. That has been the most challenging part, and also, of course, getting, ICS managers for all these now multiple entities. That, of course, the cost involved and also the additional training required. But I think those have been the main challenges. Otherwise, they are still on the path to certification, but not yet. So it's not a successful story path, but at least they are walking the journey.
Yeah, but this one, it's exactly one of the things that makes the success stories at the moment a bit harder, because we have been accompanying a couple of organizations with great efforts and they seemed ready. But in both cases, the plan that they had originally changed in October or November when they saw the final cost estimate under the new regulation. So the example you mentioned in Ethiopia, they have now cut the farmers down to 1/3. Which for EU regulation, which wasn't the original intention, but then a rather swift decision when the costs came finally in. And another example, they also had a plan, but then the costs at the end, towards the end of the year, when the final quote came in, there was a lot of jumping, is what I've seen in a lot of groups, which is challenging. More of the companies that I know of, the supply chains, they seem to have done it systematically and hopefully shifted actually successfully. I also know an example in Thailand. In the next session in the webinar, we're going to look at a lot of different examples and how they have done it and what was their way. Was it new groups that they set up? Did they use existing groups? What are the cost implications? Did they find a cunning, nice solution? And in every case, it's slightly different, but that's going to be really interesting to look at with concrete examples for during the next session, when we look a bit deeper at this adaptation to the new group of operator rules, because it's actually really complicated in practice, and many groups struggles with, especially farmers organizations and unions of cooperatives. The reorganization is really challenging in many cases.
And there is one on the use of livestock manure for fertilization that Anonymous is surprised that it's being allowed, given the kinds of medication, growth hormones, and all other inputs that are used in livestock production, which can be traced into the soil. So basically, he's asking what are some of the requirements in terms of handling of livestock manure before it can be used in organic. Yeah.
So on your own farm manure can always be used, and if it's an external input, it applies the restrictions as written in the 1165. And there, the written text, I think, is that it cannot be from factory farming. And this is not entirely defined, but it's basically the same it has been in the last 20 years. So I assume all control bodies in third countries have their own procedures to ensure that the manure application does not contaminate the soil. But there isn't any new definition nor any new restriction with regard to animal manure. It should be preferably composted, I think, is the one of the rules.
Great. I think we can give some time to hear from some people who want to voice over their comments. We've tried to respond to most of the comments in the chat, but just pausing for a moment if anybody wants to go off mute and ask their question.
If someone
Maybe as
wants
we wait.
yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Maybe if someone wants to speak, just raise your hand and we will open the microphone. Or you can still write some question in the chat also in the Q&R box. Someone, Matthew Bichan would like to speak. Then okay. Yes, please, we listen to you. Matthew, you can open your microphone. You are still on mute. Maybe
No,
you cannot do it.
He
Right.
says he didn't have a question. I think he accidentally raised the hand. But there is a comment in the chat, maybe as we wait for more hands. I've not read it, so I'll read it as he has Lawrence has written it. He says that these regulations are likely to completely destabilize most of the organic producers, especially those involved in coffee production, due to the costs involved. The requirements to comply, such as EUDR, I think he's talking about the deforestation regulation. Does the EU organic regulations give requirements for various actors on the role they can play to support compliance?
No, it's not written in the regulation, but indeed we see that the new rules do pose significant challenges, especially with regard to costs, but also just the sheer reorganization of groups to align is often something that I've seen many organizations now being stuck in without support. And I think one of the challenges that we've been working hard on, but which maybe all of you also need to play a role, is to explain to your European trade partners that you're facing these difficulties, because it's only starting that importers in Europe realize that unless they support their suppliers in the adaptation, and this includes, will probably need to include some support with certification costs or an adaptation of prices. A lot of groups are considering to stop organic production, at least for the EU, change only to other, look for other market. I mean, organizations are jumping in circles, and I think a lot of quite a few European traders have realized this and lent out a hand. There are programs, especially Fairtrade has been also very active in the last year. COLIT has been doing trainings. There are programs, but a key challenge of the higher costs is basically the EU expects the market to adjust the price. But at the moment, it feels like a big risk for producers because costs are increasing, and with world market prices and so on, they are not sure they can cover that extra cost. So indeed, as far as I'm aware, a lot of groups, even those who wanted to adapt a year ago, are somewhere caught in limbo in the adaptation, or are shocked by the new quotations and prices and considering their option, what they're going to do. Some groups cut the number of producers they certify, but of course they could also be, you could also keep your producers, say, in a national organic program for the time being to have some flexibility. At least they're under organic control and supervision, and maybe then if the EU market eventually pays a price that covers the higher certification costs, you can take them back in. But it is quite challenging from what I know. What is the best option for each group? And what several studies have found is that it's important to look at your new prices per ton of product. So especially if you have very low organic sales and now the costs increase, it may really not be the best option to invest for all your farmers in the organic certification, and you need to consider carefully whether it's worth it for you, and maybe other agroecological practices or going for another market is better for this particular situation.
Okay, thank you, Florentine. Maybe we can give Sirisap to speak. I'm sorry if I wrong with the name. But... You can open your microphone and speak, please. Ah, yes, it's working. Thank you. Please present yourself, and we don't hear you.
Hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay. I'm Surisabel Marcus, the program manager from Thailand and Laos from FairTradeNet. I have the question. I want to get confirmation about the group of operator. The new regulation said that 100% of the member must be organic. And I saw that there is a room that the member can also grow the conventional product. Is that my understanding correct?
Florentine, you had the question?
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes, your understanding is correct. Initially, we tried to argue that this doesn't make any sense, but it's how the rules are. Yes, a group of operators can only be composed of organic or in conversion members, but each organic farmer can have a non-organic unit as long as part of his or her farm is under organic production. That's how the rules are in the regulation.
Plant organic chili, but the conventional plot must be other product, not chili, right? As long as it's not chili, it's okay.
Brian, you want to answer? But I mean, I can.
Yeah, so the crop can't be the same. You can't grow the same crop, both organic and non-organic. So it has to be a different crop for starters, and it has to be different fields. So there has to be that clear distinction between the organic unit and the conventional unit.
Yeah. And in case of chili, because it's an annual crop, there is no exception for annual crops. If it is tea, for example, a perennial crop, this is the rules I explained for parallel production, that if a tea plantation is now, a tea farmer is transitioning to organic farming, he starts with only 1 or 2 plots of tea, and then he has a conversion, or she has a conversion plan. And then as part of the conversion, they gradually, there is still 1 or 2 years where there is a conventional part of the tea plantation and an organic or in conversion part of the tea plantation. But this is only for a limited time. And in some countries, depending on practice, there was long-term parallel production. Say there was a tea farmers that had a clearly separate organic and non-organic part. This is no longer possible, not under the same operation. The rules have become stricter, so the operations need to be split to different legal entities or so on, or the whole farm converted.
Okay, and the annual crop, for example, chili or rice, they always have to plant alternate with the legume crop. Like
I know in rice, this is a challenging discussion. Yes. Best to check this with your CP, because I think rice is a specific case. I'm not sure how the control bodies are gonna implement this. Yes, but the rule is for annual crops, multi-year crop rotation, including leguminous crops, is the legal requirement. And I don't know for specific crops, I mean, I don't know whether they're going to work through it with crop diversity and other crops in the fields or fallow fields, but best to discuss this with your control body. But the rule, yes, would be crop rotation, including leguminous crops, is the requirement as it's written in the regulation. And I know for rice it is challenging, so yes. Best check with your CP.
For Thailand, we have some area that very, very dry. We have problem, short of water. We don't have irrigation system. And therefore, they cannot plant legume. They plant the legume and then they just fail. That is one case. Another case, like because it's the dry area, they have the cow. The other farmer, they have a lot of cow, and they cannot keep their cow in their land, so they release the cow to find their own grass, and this cow will eat the legume, and then the farmer face a lot of like challenges. So we don't know how to comply to this regulation. So do you have any solution for us?
I don't have a detailed solution, but I actually would like to, I'll quickly ask within FIBL, actually this point, although it's new and we know it's challenging because of a lot of the other problems that are most pressing, this aspect has not been discussed or debated that much yet as a challenge. So for now, I still would recommend to discuss this with the national control bodies, because it could be because of all the other problems that they are not coming down hardest on this one, as long as there is some effort really in the right direction. Because what you describe is a common challenge, as far as I know, in a lot of the production system, and I don't know yet how this will be dealt with. Maybe the control bodies have some, I don't think they can find regional adaptations, but yeah, it's one of the aspects. Maybe the control body has some kind of guidance and what they expect as the minimum for this requirement to be met in your specific climate system.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that applies to many people. Sorry, there are some people with who also raising their hand, so maybe the very last one, so we can.
Okay, very last one I have. The area of maximum 5 hectares. That means the whole area that the farmer had. Like for example, they have, if they produce organic chili for sale, but they also have the land that produce rice, which is not organic product, or they didn't sell as the organic through their cooperative. So the maximum 5 hectares include everything that they own?
Everything that they operate. So the rice fields, yes, they count. But as I said, your farmer can have 20 hectares. It's no problem, because for the organic turnover, it will only be the turnover for the organic chili. So your 20 hectare farmers is very likely from his small chili plot that is organic to have a sale under 25,000 euro. So for the hectare, it doesn't make a difference whether it's organic or not. But for the organic turnover, obviously you only count the turnover from the organic crop. So there, it does make a difference if it's only a small part of the farm that is organic. So actually with the 25,000 euro turnover limit, we found that very few crops or production systems are actually hit. As far as I know, in Thailand, in one of the cooperatives we work with, I think they had only 4 farms in total that were really too large, because they were really large members. But all the rest were, you can be over the 5 hectare as long as you're under the 25,000 euro organic turnover. But for example, banana in Latin America is a different case, because they are all over 25,000 euro organic turnover. That's a different case than fruit farming in Africa, for example.
Okay, so it's count only the product, organic product that gets certified. So as long as it's less than 25,000, then it's okay for them.
Exactly. For that, so that's the alternative rule. And either smaller than 5 hectares. If the whole farm is smaller than 5 hectares, then no need to check the turnover. But if the farm is bigger than 5 hectares, you check the turnover. And for the organic turnover, it's only the organic crop sold to the group. So for cocoa, for example, the sales to a local trader don't count because it's not organic cocoa that they sell. It cannot be marketed as organic. It's only the organic sales to the group that count for the organic turnover.
Thank you very much. That's very clear to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you can go for it, Brian. You can.
Good afternoon. Please, can you hear me?
Yes,
Great.
we can.
Yeah. I am Nansa Toure. I'm working with United Purpose or Self-Help Africa, the Gambia office. So I have a question around the smallholder farmers. You know, we work with vegetable growers, you know, who have their own organizations that are registered and well established, and they are into vegetable production. So some of them may not have probably access to high quality inputs and good infrastructure to do more production, to be able to see how best they can explore the external market. That is the European market, you know, in terms of producing in volumes. So I'm not too sure if I need to know if, for example, COLI has any funding opportunity for the smallholder farmers, you know, to enable them have access to high quality inputs and also to be able to do large scale production. Thank you. Over to
you. Thank you for the question. Yes, we are active in Gambia. We are in fact active in more than 50 countries in Africa. Yes, we can support, but the support we give for those countries is mainly capacity building and training, technical assistance, and what we require for people is to submit their needs to us, and then we need to evaluate what you need, and we try to address your needs in order to improve things. But maybe my colleague in charge of Gambia, it's still in the room. I know she was there. Maud, are you still there? I'm not sure she's still there. If you are, please raise your hand. Like this, I can open the mic. Margot, okay. Okay, but if you want, you can contact me. I will put my email in the chat. Like this, I put you in contact with our country manager in charge of activities of COLID in Gambia, and we will exchange.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
But Brian, I don't know whether you have other experience to share, but my view is at the moment, the EU market in particular is not the most beginner friendly market, especially also not for vegetables. So maybe worth starting with a regional or national organic standard to gain more competence and knowledge of organic farming and the practices, and start exploring market needs and all of this, because exporting vegetables to the EU, and even more so under the new regulation and all the regulations that apply for this, it's very challenging as an initial start for new groups. Or maybe Brian, you can bring in some of your experience there, because I think it's important to go in steps.
No, I mean, I think you rightly put it. It's, I mean, getting the certificate is one thing, but also getting the market, getting the buyers to buy the product that you've certified is another step. So at the starting point, also we need to remember that getting the certification, you know, meeting all these requirements that we've mentioned, it takes money. It's costly. You have to train them. You have to do all the things that we've talked about. So if you don't have an assured market, then it's not wise for you to start by complying with these requirements. It's better, as Florentin said, start local, try the local market. If you have an organic association, try a participatory guarantee system or something like that, you know, where, you know, you can just do, you know, consumer deliveries. It is as you get into the experience of growing organic, then later on, when you have committed buyers that are willing preferably, even to sign an agreement with you, then you can invest in pursuing the actual certification. That's how I know most farmers have tried it, and that's the path that I've seen has been successful. For people who certify without any commitment or a market commitment, it always ends up failing. You certify once, then you can't renew it because you can't afford the cost. Did we still have any other hand up? I think we're close. No.
Maybe I can encourage for the next webinar, while maybe more questions come in. Next week, we want to look at the group of operator rules more in detail. And I think for all of you who support, I know there is a lot of people from the Fair Trade Producer Networks, and I think it will be very important to understand the rules well enough, because the adaptation of the organizational structures and how to subcontract or not subcontract, understand all the different options is actually complicated. So I both encourage you, if you have further questions of your specific cases, like on retroactive recognition, on the organization, how you organize into the new structure, send us some questions, because that way I can make sure to adapt the program for the second session a bit more to what's actually most relevant and most needed by you. So if you have example cases to share or specific questions, I'd recommend that you send them to us in advance, so that I can already try to include examples for the relevant crops, for example. If the 5 hectare rule is still complicated, we can also do some examples, but it's easier if you can let us know specific questions, especially those who are already in some progress of adapting. Then usually the practical question starts. And for the second webinar next week is an occasion to dive deeper where it's interesting and relevant for you.
No, that's very good. And Florentin, maybe I give you this one more practical question, which I try to answer, and I know you talked about in your slides. So Florence was sharing that they have cooperatives that have both organic and non-organic farmers. I guess they are fair trade cooperatives. Would the definition of the group of operators require this existing both organic and non-organic to register another legal entity which only has organic farmers?
The regulation doesn't tell you what you need to do. It says what requirements you need to meet. And the cooperative, as it is right now, does not meet the definition of a group of operator. So it could not be certified as a group of operator without changes. So, but then you have different adaptation options. Of course, one option, which I don't recommend, is to expel all non-organic farmers. If you have 700 organic farmers and 5 non-organic ones, this may be a valid adaptation solution. If you have half organic, half non-organic, and sell fair trade from all the non-organic ones, and the non-organic market is important to you, which it is for many organizations, then expelling the non-organic is a disastrous decision, because it also limits the flexibility of the main cooperative. Because for many cooperatives, it's important to be able to sell organic and non-organic, also to keep both markets alive. If they have problems with the organic market, they can still part of their production. As conventional, for many reasons, it's often important to have also the non-organic. And if the cooperative then sets up a new legal entity for just the organic members, it's only this new legal entity that will be certified as group of operator, and the current cooperative will be operator. And as an operator, you can do everything. You can sell organic and non-organic products. You can do any processing. You have no restrictions. It's just the group of operator that is very restricted in how it can be composed and what it can be doing. So that's why, together with fair trade, the recommended option, if at all possible for such cases, is to set up a legal subunit of some sorts for just the organic members. And this group can subcontract all key processes to the mother cooperative. So it can still be, the ICS staff can still be employed by the mother cooperative as it is now. The new association can subcontract the collection and the traceability system to the mother cooperative. So it's a bit more paperwork and it's still a bit more complicated. It will be 2 certificates, but it can give more operational flexibility to have 2 units instead of 1. And if it's a larger group, it may even make sense to have 2 group of operator units to stratify your risk a little bit. If one groups get decertified, you don't lose your role, your whole organic production. But this is exactly what we're gonna look at and see some examples also next week.
Great. Marie-Hélène, I think this is for you. Do you have a French version of this support? I mean, I think they mean the training.
Okay, yes. Then Colit is working mainly in French and English. Then all our material is available in French. And I said at the beginning that those webinars will be in French also around end of March. Then you will receive all French-speaking countries in Africa will receive an invitation for those 2 webinars. And we have also then on our platform, everything is in French, English, and we have also a bit of Portuguese and Spanish. But yes.
Great. I think we've tried to answer most of the questions, including the ones that we just responded through the Q&A. So unless somebody has anything, can raise their hand, or we can talk about, I think Florentine, you've talked briefly about next training, but maybe if you have anything else to say, if nobody has a hand or a question. Oh, there is a hand from Modu. Modu, you are off mute, but now you've muted yourself. We can't hear you if you're speaking.
Do you need to open your mic to be able to speak? Okay. Maybe it was a mistake. Huh?
Oh, no.
No, he wants to speak. You need to open your mic. At the moment you are on mute.
Hello.
Yes. Yes, hello.
Am I audible, please?
Yes.
Yes.
We listen to you.
Yes, thank you very much, the presenters. I'm sorry for joining late because I was doing some other commitments. First, before going, I need to ask if there is possibility for you, the host, to share the presentations or the recording for the meeting.
Yes, the presentation and the recording will be shared with all participants. Hello? Yeah, you will receive the presentation and the recording. We know that it was a lot of information. It will be good for everyone to be able to watch and to listen again some information.
Yes, thank you for that. And also, another question, probably I must have introduced myself like properly. My name is Modou Lamine Sagna, working for the Gambia NPPO, National Plant Protection. My question is, during the list of organic products that are certified, I don't see some of the organic products. For some farmers, just last week, there's a farmer who came in to request for organic product certification on moringa and other products, local products in the country here. So I don't know whether those consignments or produce are fit for exportation based on the new EU regulation for organic products, or the only products I'm seeing on the list of the produce that are in the regulations? That's what I want to ask. If someone want to introduce or include a product that is not in the list, how are the procedures for that product to be included in the list? Thank you.
So the regulation applies to all food products. So it's for labeling of food products. So any food can be certified according to the regulation. And there is a couple of specific non-food products, specifically cotton, where the regulation applies for the production of cotton. So you can certify cotton production, but only up to cotton bales, basically. So if the cotton is imported, you know, the regulation protects the organic consumers, right? So it requires products to be certified according to the regulation if they are marketed as organic. So all food product, and moringa is moringa for cosmetic purposes, then the labeling rules may be slightly different. Same for textiles, it will be slightly different, but anything as food products and a lot of the cosmetic ingredients are actually imported under the regulation into Europe for further processing. So there is the list of certified organic products is thousands of different products. The question becomes a bit more complicated which non-food products it applies to. But a lot of the cosmetic ingredients as well are being certified under the EU regulation and can be imported as such. Cotton is a bit specific, maybe worth pointing out, because with all the challenges with the EU regulation, it doesn't really apply to cotton imports because the EU does not import cotton in bale stage. They import cotton as yarn or as textiles or fabrics or even the ready garments. And at this stage, the EU regulation does not apply. So you could import, for example, a t-shirt, an organic t-shirt, or the fabric for an organic cotton t-shirt that shall be labeled under GOTS as organic in Europe. You could import it if it's only certified according to the EU, according to the NOP American certification. So for cotton producers, they may not need to change to compliance with the EU regulation, which is actually good news for the cotton producers in West Africa, because the labeling is under private standards and not regulated by Council European law.
Great, thanks, Florentin. I think you also meant to talk about the plant protection products. So if it's not on the list, can you use or can you not use? I think somebody also had
was
a
the
similar
moringa
question.
about plant protection substance?
I think that's what I had.
Okay,
but,
okay, then
yeah.
it's an important question. It's a big change. Yes, either if there are 9 plant extracts that are listed in the 1165, and if they are not listed, then they cannot be used under the new regulation. And this is actually one of the major challenges why I highlighted the check with your CP whether it's still allowed, because exactly local plant extracts are not permitted. And co-lead, but another colleague of Marie-Hélène, they are actually collecting a list of substances that are commonly used in plant protection products, because there will be a need to submit a detailed dossier of use and submit a detailed dossier to the EU Commission to get these substances or plant extracts approved. And it does take 1 or 2 years and it's very costly. So it will actually be important that co-lead is actually taking on an important coordination role. So if this is the case, I think I could give you the contact of the, or we could send, if you send an email to Marie-Hélène, I think she can provide the contact. Morag and some of her colleagues can provide more information on the process, and also they are collecting information which substances are most important and relevant to register. For example, chili is not on the list of authorized plant extracts, just to point this out as one of the minor technical details. So it's officially not be permitted for plant protection process purposes, but you can use it for fertilization and plant strengthening, but not for plant protection.
Thank you. I think we are time now. Over to you, Marie, to wind us off.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, indeed it's time. Then I see we had a lot of participants. I know participants cannot see, but we were around 140 persons. Thank you so much for the FIBEL team. It was really great, really clear, I think. As I said, it was a lot of information. And of course, we will send you the presentation and the registration, the recording. But then, as we said also for the next session that will be more practical, please don't hesitate to sign up for the webinar if it's not done yet. And you can send me your question, like this Florentine could prepare already some answer to your questions. And thank you very much. It was really nice. And we know it's a challenge for everyone, but COLLIT is there, and we'll do our best to support you. Thank you very much, and see you next week, same time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.